Hello everyone, Derek Johnson with Tatango.com. I'm here at Mobile World Congress 2019 in LA. I'm here with Nick Lane. He's the founder and chief industry insight analyst at Mobilesquared. Hey Nick, how you been?
Hi, very good.
Good. So first off, before we jump into all the data, what is a chief industry insight analyst?
So my job is to look at all the data and try and find the stories. So I try and look at where is the market going. So we've got colleagues that give us all the forecasts. I then play around with the forecasts and then try and find some trends so we can try and develop something that's clear and powerful, insightful for our clients, for the industry, that really kind of says this is a very compelling area.
Okay. And who pays for these insights?
Not enough companies, basically. Obviously, the same with any business would like more, but we started specialising in business messaging about 5 years ago. When we're covering all things mobile. We used to do a lot of mobile advertising, and we've kind of progressed away from there, focusing more around mobile marketing. But gradually, as the amount of data was, shall we say, flawed, or we think inaccurate around business messaging, we've kind of jumped on that, and we've really kind of seized that as a really great initiative for us. So any company that's involved in business messaging or wants to understand what business messaging is or what it can do for them, they're the companies that are and should be buying our data. So it's lots of mobile operators from around the world, quite a few brands, but mostly a lot of people within the business messaging ecosystem.
And we're here at Mobile World Congress. It seems like you're the de facto data for RCS, for mobile messaging. Was there anybody before who was doing this before, or was this kind of the white space that you entered and you found no one was doing it, or was the data just incorrect? What did it look like before you started this?
Well, we're doing a lot of projects for clients.
Okay.
And we're using other companies' data in terms of what's the size of the market. And as we started to get deeper and deeper involved in the research, it was pretty clear that the numbers that were out there were inaccurate.
Were they higher or lower?
Massively inflated.
Inflated?
Yeah.
Okay, do you think that was
inflated.
just because it makes sense for people that are in the industry to inflate their own numbers so it looks good, or?
So, yes. I mean, everyone's big numbers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even we find, so we've got clients that use our numbers.
Okay.
They use our numbers for business planning, but they'll use other people's numbers for press releases because they're much bigger.
Yeah.
But we know that, because we spend our whole time doing this. This is all we do. We live, sleep, dream, sleepwalk, you name it, we do business messaging. That is all we do now. Other companies, don't really want to talk about them, but they are focused across lots of different areas.
Okay.
So they're really probably only touching on this area once or twice a year.
So you think that your numbers are a little more realistic, I guess? Because again,
we get a lot of industry data.
Okay.
So we don't really have to make anything up.
Okay.
We're well connected. We get a lot of information from the aggregators. We get quite some information from brands. We get a lot of information from carriers. We've just joined the GSMA as well, so we'll obviously hope to form a closer relationship with pretty much every carrier now.
Okay.
And the more that we do that, the better our data will become. So we've just updated our A2P SMS numbers, and we've seen quite a drop in our numbers. Yeah, but so we expect. So the market, we did have it for 2018 at around $17.5 billion.
Okay.
Based on the data that we got for last year, we've now put that back down to about $14.5 billion. So we expect the market to grow to about 17 billion by 2020, 2021. Then we expect to start seeing the numbers fall, but not in a negative way, because it's this traffic that's dropping is migrating over onto RCS.
Okay.
So it's not cannibalizing it, it's actually creating the platform to really kind of move forward.
It's just shifting
and
the
generate
numbers.
more revenues, yeah.
But I'm guessing there's people even that may pay you that aren't that happy with you saying that the numbers are going to go down.
But we can dress them up for them if we wanted, and we could tell them it's a $25 trillion industry, but that's not going to do them any good.
Yeah.
So this was one of the problems that we uncovered probably about 4 or 5 years ago, with a lot of operators not investing in SMS firewalls and obviously not monetizing what could be the white route traffic. And the reason they couldn't justify that investment is because they're seeing, the market could be worth $60, $70 billion, so they're reading. They were then trying to do an internal business case. And, but the numbers were just not achievable.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of saying, well, this isn't for us, and then they'd kind of walk away and look at other areas. But we know by creating numbers that are realistic, that reflect what's going on in the marketplace based on actual data, we're in a good space.
It's interesting. And I didn't know this. You actually founded Mobilesquared. This was like 11 years ago, so kind of when we started Tatango. So we've been doing mobile messaging for a ton. You said it originally started as kind of like a newsletter. How did the company start, and then what's been the evolution of the company?
So I was a principled analyst
Okay.
with then Informa, now it's now Ovum. And I was just living on a plane.
Okay.
I kind of got bored of that and wanted to do something else. So to start the company up, it's more of a kind of a lifestyle thing.
Okay.
But as a marketing tool, we use Mobilesquared as the newsletter.
Okay.
But people really like that name. And so a few companies wanted to buy it off us.
Okay.
And we kind of realised actually...
By the newsletter?
Well, just the name.
Okay.
The title.
Okay.
And we said no. And kind of glad we didn't, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good name.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it came from. So it was originally just a newsletter that we're kind of keeping our toes in with our journalistic roots.
Yeah.
And just kind of start pushing our thoughts, some of our analysis in the area that we're covering at the time out to our readership.
And how were you making money when you started the company? Were you selling data, or were you more of an agency?
No, it's more of a client. So it's more just doing bespoke research for clients.
Okay.
So we came up with this concept of a kind of 24-hour turnaround.
Okay.
So, for example, if you needed data for a meeting or you needed something, then the chances are we would probably have something that would help you, and we could turn it around in 24 hours. And that was initially the thinking, but that's just caused too many sleepless nights. Yeah. So we kind of moved away from that and started saying, actually, no, it needs to be a month or 2 months, so we got our life back again.
So is it, for the business, is the majority of like brands or carriers, are they paying you on a per, question basis, or are they just subscribing to something? What does the business model look like?
It's a bit of both. So what do we do now? We sell a lot of reports, so our data books. So again, we're not selling a traditional report because we did our research and said that most companies don't have time or people.
So you did your own research on your own?
On our own research, exactly.
That's smart.
Yeah. Well, that's what we do.
That's good.
So we're talking to our contacts, and they're telling us that we don't have time to read a 400-page report. Yeah. We'd rather have something condensed, summarises the key findings, but what we want is data. So that's really where the whole data book comes from. And for our A2P SMS or our RCS data book, they contain millions of data points. So we look at 200 markets. Wow. We split each market out by operator, and we probably get, for SMS, we've got data points, actual data points for each market. And the SMS
so 200 market. Okay, and what market you're talking about, like different countries? Yep. Wow, so it's not just the U.S. Like
no, it's everywhere.
You're looking everywhere.
I mean, we say the top 200 markets.
Okay.
But there's only 225.
Wow.
So we've pretty much got everything covered, yeah.
Okay. So why not the 25? Just too small?
Too small.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And that's super interesting. When you're going out and doing that, how long does it take to go out and get all of that data and compile it? Like, what is the process when 200 different countries, and then each one has their own kind of mix? Like, what does the staff look like? How long did these things take to kind of compile? And then is it essentially once you put it out, you start again, from fresh, or do you build on those numbers?
Depends what we do. So it does vary. I mean, there's 7 of us in the company, so we're all working very hard.
Are they mainly data people?
No. So we've got a few data people. Okay. A couple of analysts. We've got a few researchers, and then a few people supporting, doing all the marketing, logistics, etc. So a big thank you to them. So, I mean, just coming back to the business model, so what we do is either sell the reports data books, or we do it as a subscription. Okay. Now, as the people who, obviously, our subscribers will tell you, we're often a bit late, but that's because we're thorough. Yeah. So we start, each data book probably takes a minimum of 6 months to do. So A2P SMS, we started at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. So what's that, February, March time? Yeah. We've just finished it and published it now.
And how big are these data books? And is it like a PDF?
No, well, there's 2 things. So you can get it in an Excel file. Okay.
So it's a lot of like actual. It's not
It's just actual data.
data. Okay,
Yeah.
so this isn't like a book you flip through and you learn something. It's more here's the raw
It's data that you flip through. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
interesting.
So it's death by data. So you need to be able to kind of focus on things, because we know that we send data out to a lot of clients and they just send it back to us and go, we don't understand what we're looking at.
Okay.
So you need to be able to look at what you're, understand what you're doing, be able to process that data, and be in a good position to obviously use that. So you can either get that in Excel, we do it online as well, so we use Tableau.
Yep.
So we create the richness there, which is pretty useful, and then you can go very, very granular.
So these companies have the resources to take in the raw data and essentially then figure out what their question is and then answer it with that data.
Yeah, so it's either doing their own business planning,
Okay.
or they try and work out what their market share is. And again, because as we find out when we do our research and as companies share their data with us, we ask them questions about, what do you think the size of the market is? We often get told it's kind of that question thrown back at us. It's, well,
you tell us.
We're only going to quote you your data. Sounds quite flattering. So
Interesting.
that's always good.
Okay, so we're here at Mobile World Congress. Every year at Mobile World Congress, we talk about RCS. Every year, it is the year of RCS, as people like to joke sometimes. What now kind of is your take on RCS? What's happening with RCS? I know you're giving a presentation. So when you give these presentations, you go in front of the GSMA and RCS lab, you take your data, you don't show them an Excel spreadsheet, you make it look really nice and explain kind of what the data looks like for the people in the room. Tell us kind of what, like a preview of today's data, what's going to be interesting for people that are going to hear your presentation today?
Well, normally I'd stand up and do a kind of weather forecast.
Yep.
This is what we expect to happen with RCS. These are the user numbers. This is the growth. This is the revenues. But there's only so many times we can do that without kind of going mad and pulling our hair out. So this time we're kind of looking at where is RCS in relation to why and how should brands be using it.
Okay.
So what we're starting to see probably in the last 6 months is things are finally starting to happen. Before that is really very much kind of Groundhog Day. And it's quite frustrating. I think if you're a brand and you're coming to an event and you're just seeing similar kind of presentations, similar case studies, and your view from an external perspective is that the market hasn't moved.
Correct.
So now it's starting to move. Things are starting to happen.
And by move, do you mean, is this essentially consumer adoption? Like, is that the thing that matters?
Not so much. It's more kind of brand adoption and case studies.
Okay.
So we're now starting to get some decent data from case studies that show, kind of from big brands as well, some of which I think will be announced here. The campaigns that have decent reach for the first time, and some kind of actionable information and data based on who's seen the campaign, when, how long are they kind of engaging with it, and what are they doing with it.
Okay.
So you can start to see now that actually people are actually now making transactions with using RCS.
Well,
and that's kind of the first.
Just for the people that are kind of new to RCS, it seems like the evolution has been the technology first. We got to get that up and running and agree on it, which took a long time. Because there's 200 different areas and carriers and people involved. Then it was we got to get actual people using it in sense of the consumers using it. Now it seems like we got to get the brands using it. And then you look back after the brands start using it, and now we have a little bit of like a case study. Now it's super interesting. Now hopefully more brands, which will then drive consumer. Like, do you feel we're at that point right now in RCS?
We're getting there. So for brands, it's all about scale.
Okay.
So something that we ran around Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, where we reached out to brands and said, how big does RCS have to be before you get interested? And quite a few people said, well, it's got to have 100 million.
100 million.
Reach.
Okay.
That's what some of the big brands came back and said. So looking at what's going to happen with RCS adoption next year, the market the US will reach 100 million users by the end of 2020.
So by the end of 2020, 100 million consumers will have access to RCS.
Yes.
And I know there's a difference between P2P RCS, which is me texting you, and then there's A to P. But I know those numbers are kind of converging in terms of percentage. So is it 100 million A to P? Like, will brands be able to message those consumers? Is that 100 million?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, the A to P is still a bit behind.
Behind, okay.
But I mean, the way that a lot of the device manufacturers now have been quite aggressive with their software updates,
Okay.
over-the-air updates as well. So Samsung in particular, that's really changing now. The fact how often, how regularly Android users are updating their software, whereas previously they weren't really doing it. So a lot of them were sticking with the same software they got with the device when they got the device.
Yes, okay.
So 2-year contract, the chances are they'll still be on that same software.
Okay.
Apple users are pushed endlessly by
Yes, updates.
to update. Yeah, exactly.
I'm getting an update right now, I bet. Okay, so and most of our viewers are in the United States. So we have end of 2020, about 100 million users. The question always is Apple part of that 100 million, or is Apple not part of that? What's your take?
Apple won't be part of that.
Okay.
So our understanding is that Apple will have to adopt RCS at some point, because it's been mandated by the GSMA that anyone that wants to use the 5G logo has to have RCS as their default messaging platform. So they'll have to go there at some point.
So it's like a roundabout way of forcing them, or at least if they want to use the 5G. I bet Apple will come up with their own thing, though.
Possible. I mean, that's for them to say if they ever come out and speak publicly.
Yeah.
But in terms of supporting RCS, they will do that on a peer-to-peer side.
Okay.
And they'll do that to make sure that the experience as an iPhone user has is consistent across every device. So right now, if you send an iMessage, obviously, to someone on Android, it will be delivered as an SMS.
Yes. Yep.
So they want to try and avoid that, and vice versa. Any Android messages coming on will have any richness included and won't default back to an SMS. So that's what they're trying to do. But in terms of supporting RBM, rich business messaging, that won't happen.
Okay.
Why would they want to do that? Because if you think two of their biggest competitors are Google and Samsung.
Yeah.
So why would they want to help Google and Samsung?
So you think they'll stick with their own proprietary ABC, Apple Business Chat, or something along those lines?
Yeah, but I mean, also the models are different. So RCS is very much, on RBM, is very much kind of an outbound model.
Yes.
Whereas you look at what Apple are doing with ABC, that's an inbound model. That's similar to what WhatsApp's really started with.
Yep. And inbound, like the consumers at the hotel, they text the hotel.
They get in contact
rather
with
than the hotel texting them.
Exactly,
okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of one of the big differences there as well. So whether Apple want to change that and to start to develop something outbound remains to be seen, from what we've been told, again, by our contacts who apparently know Apple.
Yep.
They're not interested in that because they just think that could potentially damage the brand.
Do you think at your presentation later, do you think people are going to be excited about this news, or is it kind of just par for the course, or do you think they're going to be disappointed in terms of the growth? What do you think the reaction?
They better be excited. I spent a long time on this.
But is it a good thing for the industry? Was it going to be 50 million? Now it's 100 million. What was the estimate a year ago? Like, are we higher or lower?
I think a year ago our numbers were probably higher.
Okay.
The way that forecasting always works is that the more visibility you get, the more transparency, the more defined numbers become and markets become, and more companies share more data with you. So, our numbers have come down, but we think now they're probably as low as they will be.
Okay.
But, I mean, again, that's why we do our RCS forecast every quarter.
You got to update it.
Because we have to update it, because something will always change. So, sitting here now, something's probably happening out there that will mean we're going to have to go back and go,
this is why we do these videos
again. Exactly. So that's one of the things that we need to kind of overcome. In SMS, in A2P SMS, that doesn't really happen. So, because the market's quite clearly defined, everything kind of happens quite nicely. Every company goes about doing their business on a day-to-day basis. RCS is fundamentally different.
And you're from the UK, right?
Certainly.
Okay. Just for our UK fans, what is the outlook for RCS there? Like, compared to the US, is it way faster adoption, about the same?
No, much slower. So the UK is different as well, in that Vodafone launched a couple of years ago, and it's been sitting there twiddling its thumbs for a couple of years, kind of saying to the other operators, come on, launch.
Okay.
We're bored.
Okay. So they've launched.
So they've launched. But again, they're not promoting it because no one really wants to just market to Vodafone.
Yes, yeah.
So brands want to market across every company.
Yep.
So that's where Google have come in. So Google have introduced Google Guest or Guest Cloud.
Okay.
And that is an OTT service that allows Android users on a mobile operator that has not launched their own RCS platform to access Android messages.
Okay.
Which is obviously RCS. So that's had quite a positive impact. We think it's quite good for the marketplace, not looking at the revenue model or whatever that could be, but just in terms of getting the market going, we think it's got a really positive impact because it's basically saying to the operators, if you don't do something, we will. And so they've done something. So they've launched, I think, in France and UK. There's some other rollouts happening now. But it's got the operators to actually say, we've got to do this now. So it's really kind of got them to up their game. So we're going to see launches quite quickly now.
You think the pressure from like the, let's say, OTT providers like WhatsApp, Facebook, is that helping the adoption of RCS because it's pushing the carriers to kind of do something? Like what is the biggest, pressure for them to actually, because it takes a lot of money for them to deploy RCS and support it and roll it out. What is that thing that is really pushing them forward on RCS?
There is the threat from the OTT guys.
Okay.
So obviously not so much here in the US with something like WhatsApp, but around lots, the rest of the world where there's 1.5 billion users, that is seen as quite a threat. But the issue that you have there is that you've got to opt those users in.
Yep.
And so you've almost got to start again. So, you've got brands and companies say, there's 1.5 billion users, which is brilliant. That's fantastic. But what can you do with them? The answer is actually pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
Because again, a brand has to get their clear opt-in to communicate with them. That's why they're doing this kind of inbound model.
Yeah.
And they will then potentially kind of flip that to do outbound as well. But they can't do it without the opt-in. Whereas anyone that's doing SMS marketing now has that mobile number.
Correct, yep.
And that will apply to RCS.
It's the same,
So it's already there.
Yeah.
So in terms of the pressure and the threat, it's real, but the OTTs have a hell of a lot of work to do to try and get to where the operators already are today.
Yeah, correct, because it's already built-in advantage there. Yeah. Okay.
And I think the other thing to look at is in the US, obviously Facebook and Messenger is massive.
Yeah.
But our research shows from consumers they don't want to be contacted on Facebook and Messenger. Yeah. That is a private.
Oh, so you mean from a business?
From a business,
yes, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, they do on a personal basis.
Yeah. Okay.
But from a business, they don't want that information.
What country is just like massive adoption? I've heard Japan in terms of RCS. What is just like trumping everyone else? Is there a country that is just like...
No.
Okay, so it's still in kind of the infancy stage, or at least growing.
I mean, in Japan, I think there's about 11 million users.
Okay. How many people in Japan, do you know?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't either.
More than 11 million.
Okay.
Because I know the big one out there is Line.
Okay.
That's the big messaging.
That's the OTT
That's
provider.
That's the OTT, yeah. That's kind of... So that's big in a few markets in Asia. Very big. It dominates.
Yep. So is that pressure, because it dominates in that industry and it's an OTT, it's like pressure for the carriers to roll it out fast and get it done?
Partly, but also because I think they kind of want to take back control.
Yes, okay.
They can see that Line's doing well as a peer-to-peer platform.
Yes.
The issue that you've got with something like Line, in our understanding, is that if you're a brand, you've got to pay a large amount of money to access their platform.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you've then got to pay per message.
Yeah.
So it's a big annual investment for a brand to use that platform. So again, if operators get the business model right around RCS, they've got a ready-made platform that can generate them a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, Japan's getting there, but then you can say that about a lot of markets. Every market's kind of getting there. I wouldn't say there's one market that's there yet.
Okay. I was kind of reviewing the questions before, and I really wanted to ask this question. In terms of, and I'm asking this to a lot of other executives, what were your initial predictions, maybe in mobile messaging, that were just 100% wrong, or were close to 100% wrong? What did you get wrong? And this could be 5 years ago, 2 years ago, last week, whatever it is.
Obviously, being professional, we never get anything wrong. There's just different levels of
working on the data.
Yeah, exactly. So, and also, it's never our fault.
Yes, because you're looking at the data.
We get information. So if we get misinformation, we can always throw it back at people that gave us that numbers anyway. So, so we've never been wrong.
What about like forward-looking, I guess? Because you get the backward-looking data, right? The forward-looking data, you have to make some assumptions. Were there any assumptions that just didn't work out as well or as you thought they would? You don't care which way the data goes.
There are some companies that have an agenda. So if, for example, they're looking to be acquired, they will share some very positive information.
Yep.
which we can then feed into our numbers that could inflate the market, which obviously increases their market value. We used to get that a lot of the time in the early days around mobile advertising as companies looking to be acquired.
Okay.
And so we get some huge numbers where actually, when you actually sit down and look at them, you think that is just not achievable. But I think we've kind of gone through that now, to be honest. And I think the way that we look at things as well, from internally, a KPI for us is really looking at the cost of the value per subscriber.
Okay.
And so, if you can see that, so in one particular market, the cost of the value for each individual sub is $100 per year. That's ridiculous.
This is for the brand, the value?
Well, this is just in terms of our own forecast.
Okay, your own
forecast. So, kind of our own internal kind of sense checking.
Yes.
So if we can see that something's really high and we know it can't be that high.
A subscriber can't be worth $1,000.
No.
Okay, so $100
not in the world of messaging or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, $100 is kind of that.
Yeah.
You feel comfortable in that range.
It has to be.
A little
in
more.
The sense.
Okay.
That's normally the range that we're looking at, really, per view, or $1, a couple of dollars in some markets.
Okay.
So that's kind of the range. So we know that what the parameters are that we need to be looking at when we're doing numbers.
Okay. And you said 100 cents, or what did you say? I said $100.
No, much lower. So 1 cent. No. So some markets it could be a couple of dollars a year.
Okay.
But in a lot, it's probably sub $1.
And that's the value of that subscriber to the brand?
To the size of the actual market.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that would basically... So the way that we look at our numbers, and when we do our forecast in business messaging, we look at what's the value to the operator, what's the value to everyone else.
Everybody, yeah. And that's those numbers you present. RCS is a $1 billion, whatever the number is, $1 billion market. So you're kind of looking at each individual subscriber and putting, a nominal value to that. So you at least have a check on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we were talking earlier, one thing I've been pressing for the last 3-4 years is RCS pricing, because the brands need to know how much they're going to pay per message. The carriers need to know how they're going to make money off this, and the aggregate, everybody in the ecosystem. I read on the agenda for the RCS lab that you had a recommendation for pricing for the industry. Is that true?
Very true, yes.
Okay, and what is it?
So, obviously being British, I'm now starting to compare RCS pricing to Brexit.
Yep.
In the sense that we're all sick to death of it. It just needs to get done. It's the same with RCS pricing. Something needs to happen.
Okay.
So, in all our conversations with industry, with operators, with brands, we've got quite a clear view of what would be acceptable.
And so before you go into that, why hasn't it happened? Like, why? Everybody's asking for it. What do you think are the impediments to actually getting a pricing model? And then, because you're essentially having to come up with the pricing model, what's holding everybody back?
There's a worry that if you get it wrong, it won't work. It's as simple as that. So if you go in too high, it's going to be a massive deterrent for the brands. Yep. However, you can go down. The fear is whatever price is set, you can't go up. Even though you could say from an industry perspective, you could say if you're an aggregator to a client, this is just a launch price.
Yes.
Just to see how effective it is. We'll run it for 6 months and then we'll come back and we'll tell you actually it could be X amount more.
It's hard though to go to a brand and say...
That's the problem. Because brands say, well, we've got budget and we don't really know what that means for us and how we can then prepare for that.
So nobody wants to stick their neck out right now and be the one that announces the price, because most likely they'll be wrong. You'll have to adjust one way.
There's no wrong or right, is there? But it's just what's acceptable by brands. So so we've done some research for a client that shows that large brands will pay up to 10x times the cost per engagement compared to small brands. So small brands will only pay one fee. That's it. And in their mind, the cost of RCS, because this has been set by industry speak to them, will be the cost of an SMS.
Okay.
And that's what they want. And the trouble is, there's been a lot of people go around saying RCS is SMS 2.0. That's fine if they want to say that.
So for the small brands, they're essentially saying it feels like an SMS, even though maybe it has a little richer kind of content.
Makes no difference to a brand. It's just a message.
It's a message.
That's it.
Okay.
Even though, we can go around in the industry, it's so rich.
The best thing.
You've got carousels.
Yeah.
It is amazing. It's a message. That's ultimately what it is.
Small brands think that.
So small brands will just say, actually, I've been told it's an SMS upgrade. It's SMS. In my mind, therefore, it's SMS. I'm not going to pay anything more than that.
Okay.
And that's typically what we're seeing from every small SME, effectively.
Okay.
The large brands will pay a lot more because they can see the value in that. Now, whether, it's also what is that message being used for, whether it's for marketing and promotions, customer care, and again, each brand places significant value on different things. Customer care seems to be one area where they place most value.
Okay.
So that is a big area moving forward for RCS.
Customer care. What about like banking? And then where does marketing kind of fit in there in terms of the value that they're placing?
Well, I think something like marketing, because it's going to encourage engagement. So we've been playing around with RCS performance versus mobile banner ads and direct mail.
Okay.
And the results are staggering. So, for example, we just said that if a brand spends $1 million on each, what would the results would be in terms of eyeballs? So, for $1 million on a mobile banner ad campaign, you would probably serve something in the region of about 285 million ads.
Okay, impressions.
Okay, yep. Of which the click-through rate of that would be 0.01.
Very low, yep.
And then, so that's, I think, 285,000 click-throughs.
Okay.
So that's pretty small. Direct mail, I think they have, I think it's about 3, 4, 5% open rate.
Yep.
And again, so you can reach probably, I think, a third of a million people, of which...
For that cost.
For that cost. With RCS and the cost of a message, you can reach about 16.5 million people.
So a huge amount of people.
Huge amount of people. But the read rate of that is about 75%.
Yeah.
So in terms of, if you look at it just from an impressions perspective, it smashes absolutely everything beyond that. So then, based on who's read that impression, who would then potentially go on and then convert, again, RCS or RBM will just outperform every other channel out there by a significant distance.
The larger brands, they're saying it could even be up to 10x more valuable. That's
potentially
considerable,
Oh,
lift.
absolutely. I mean, if everyone's talked about the power of messaging, and that a very wonderful stat that's been around for a while is that every 90% of messages are read within 3 minutes.
Yes, you guys were the one that originally came up with that.
We did.
Okay, but and now it's always been kind of quoted the 99% open rate or read rate, and then 90% within 3 minutes. What do you think now it is? For SMS, and then I think you've done some studies on RCS, maybe just to kind of recalibrate the market now. What do you think that looks?
I think it's lower.
Okay.
Because I think nowadays most people are getting inundated. Not inundated, that's probably the wrong word.
Got a lot.
But there's a lot of messages coming in. So it could be in-app notifications. It could be, SMS. It could be RCS, WeChat line, whatever. And so the chances of a message being pushed down the line is highly likely these days. So obviously, when we did that 10 years ago, you got a message, it would just sit on your home screen. It was there, just sit there until you did something with your phone, typically. So, given the amount of times that people look at their phone, even going back 10 years, that behaviour hasn't changed, but the amount of messages and incoming like feeds and streams that you get, that has changed. So I would have thought those numbers have come down, but that's where RCS can come in with its metrics.
Do you think, on SMS currently, I think that 99% was done with the carriers, or you were talking to people that received the message to get some feedback. In SMS, there is no like a receipt that the thing has been read or opened, essentially. RCS has that.
Yeah.
Do you think the curve, so let's say it went from 99% and it's been going steadily down, but not that crazily. So it goes down, and you think it's going to go up because of RCS, or it's going to stop?
I don't think it will go up.
Okay.
I think.
So where do you think it stops?
Well, at the moment, a lot of the case studies that we've seen have it around about 78-80%.
Okay.
Which is again, an
really
impressive figure. But I mean, it'll probably drop, but a little bit.
Yep.
So probably in a few years' time, once RCS and RBM is up and running, and we've just got this abundance of campaigns to talk about, then it'd probably be, I reckon, 75 or 75%.
That's still
high.
Huge.
Oh, it's massive.
Compared to email or whatever other channel you're using, even push or something.
Yeah.
So this one's interesting. What's something brands, let's say, misunderstand about RCS messaging? What do you have to explain to them that they're getting wrong right now, or they're thinking wrong about?
It's two things. So one, they think it's SMS.
Okay. The small businesses, it's just
Any brand, to be honest, because it's been positioned as messaging.
okay.
They just think that a message is a message. And obviously, as you and I know, because we're immersed in this, every message is different.
Yes. Yep.
So I think that's the first thing. And again, around the pricing, not understanding what you're going to be getting in terms of pricing. So by applying this SMS mindset to I'm going to only pay for an SMS on RCS, I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges. So it's kind of looking at what does the industry need to do to almost reset how brands are going to look at this. So whether they have to stop calling it messaging, whether they just call it engagement, it's an engagement channel, something like that. Maybe something like that has to happen. But that seems to me where you need to get a clean break
Okay.
between how people think about SMS, what they use for SMS, and how they look to the world of messaging and RCS and apply that moving forward.
Now back to the pricing. You said the SMBs look at it like just normal messaging, so therefore it would be priced just like normal messaging. Most people in the United States, you pay for outbound, maybe you get inbound free, or it's a very nominal fee. That seems like a good model, and it makes a lot of sense for marketing type stuff. Then you get into the customer support. That's when you're texting Delta and you're saying, hey, when's my flight? You have a conversation that's maybe 20 messages back and forth. Does the same pricing model that you're recommending, does it have any kind of deviation for conversations? Or will it just be you pay per message in and out?
So we think this is part of the issue that's been holding back the industry, is that not only is how much does an RCS message cost, but when does an RCS message turn into a session?
Okay. And a session is
a session is when you start having this engaged to and fro.
Okay.
So, if you very much think that an SMS is very much kind of a unilateral exchange, RCS is meant to be this bilateral conversation where you consumer obviously starts engaging with the brand and so on and so forth. So the question is, what is a session? How do you then build for a session? Is it based on time, number of messages, length of time, length of messages, whatever? Everyone's got a different opinion.
Okay.
And the trouble is, if you think within the GSMA community alone, there's 850, 900 operators.
Yes.
You've got all the kind of associate members, which are another few hundred, I think. And if everyone's involved in that, everyone's got an opinion.
Yeah.
So we've been processing all of these opinions. And so we kind of think, actually, what needs to happen is that there needs to be a clear divide between what is a single event message and what is a conversation. So at no point when a consumer starts engaging with a brand, if they're using messaging, will that become a conversation? So what we're basically proposing is that a brand either buys a bundle of messages or a bundle of conversations, and the two are kept completely separate.
Okay. Sort of like SMS and MMS. They're similar, but they're built completely differently.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're a brand and you want to use more richness, then let's say instead of calling it a message, we now call, let's say in terms of pricing, it becomes a token or a credit. Okay. And so with more richness in each message, you can either use, let's say if you're going to send a carousel, that could be 5 tokens.
Okay.
So then you can then as a brand say, well, we've just purchased 50 million RCS messages, tokens, and this is how we're going to use them. Now, it could be that with, let's say some heavy users, they will use 30, 40, 50 messages going to and fro with that brand. And at which point they're going to think, well, actually, it's going to be more effective for us to not stop buying single event engagements and move the conversation.
That's like an open session for maybe 24 hours. You get unlimited messaging or something like that.
So within that, we think that should cost around 10 to 12 cents for a conversation.
Dollars.
US.
Okay, 10 to 12 cents. So if I want to message Delta and have a long conversation with them about buying something or changing flights, 10 to 12 cents. And then the individual transactions, the SMBs think it's like 1 cent, just like an SMS, kind of the standard.
Whatever, yeah. So basically it would be it would follow SMS pricing.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think what we'd need to do is just kind of get that divide in brains, in the mindset of
because it's brand new.
Of brands. Exactly.
Yeah. Even email marketers don't think of it that way. It's all just kind of push for email marketing.
Yeah.
You're more going to like a customer support desk where you're having conversations. It's like a completely different, even though it's email, it's two different things.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's changing that mindset. So we just think by buying a bundle of tokens, that starts to create a clear divide between what's happened previously with SMS and what we hope will happen with RCS. Obviously, this is just kind of almost a preliminary model.
Yep.
Just to kind of be able to position it and go to the brands. Because there will be other models coming around. It could be something more around advertising. Obviously, you've got the customer care element coming into this as well. And then you've got something like chatbot search as well. So all of these, I mean, what we're looking at right now is just a kind of effective kind of termination rate model.
Okay.
But this is just going to be layered out.
And at the RCS lab, are you going to essentially be saying like 10 to 12 cents? Like you're going to be that specific on the price? Okay. And that's one thing. There has been a discussion about, sessions and direct messaging, but it's always, okay, and then they kind of move on, and you're like, well, how much? So you're throwing a price out there.
We're just basically throwing a concept that we hope companies can embrace and go to brands with.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. It's just trying to move things forward another step.
Yeah.
Because we're at the time now where we really need to turn this and transform this into a commercial opportunity. We've got to stop talking about it and do it.
And you're actually going out and talking to the brands to get their feedback. So this is not, you're talking to the carriers and you're kind of transforming what the carriers think and then saying that's what the brand should think. You're actually going out and talking to the brands and saying, what is the value here? So it should be relatively accurate. Because I think only the people in the RCS labs are the people, the aggregators, the people that are selling it. We have our own opinions on what it should be, but at the end of the day, it's what they'll pay.
Yeah, I mean, and again, everyone's different.
Yeah.
So it could be that for customer care, brands will pay a lot more because if you think, what's the comparison there? Correct. If it's the cost of a call, then you could be looking at $4 or $5 per call.
Yes.
Whereas for the cost of an RCS conversation, whatever that could be, it could be that you're charging $1, $2. That brand is still saving money.
Yeah.
And the chances are it'll be a much better experience if it's a chatbot, in theory, than dealing with a human. It should be far more efficient, and potentially that customer will go away feeling far more satisfied.
Yep.
So, the benefits around all the other areas, kind of like NPS, etc., should also be felt.
I see how you're kind of positioning it. Let's compare, RCS to the other channels rather than, I think for the last few years, it's always been, let's compare RCS to the existing SMS channel. I like that because then it really puts things in perspective. But I think we have to align the SMS. If you're paying just sub-penny rates on SMS, it's going to be a jump for them. Especially if they think it's just another SMS message.
But it doesn't have to be, though, because it depends how you use RCS.
Correct.
So, again, if you just price it, even though, let's say you're buying one token, using one token, which is, let's say, effectively the cost of an SMS anyway, nothing changes for them.
Correct.
But ultimately, they might actually think, well, I might want to add a bit of richness.
Yep.
And instead of using one token, I'm going to use 2 tokens this time. And then if they start to see more engagement, more interaction, it gradually pushes them up the value chain.
You think from a marketing standpoint, and maybe people that are watching this, they were thinking the RCS message is just everything that RCS offers, that's going to be like 1 cent. You're saying essentially, if it looks like an SMS message as an RCS, that's 1 cent. If you want to add a carousel, you pay a little bit more.
Exactly. So it'd be, let's say, 1 token would be for a basic RCS message.
Just 160 characters or whatever characters. Yeah.
So there's no change.
Okay.
But then if you want to add a picture, if you want to add a link, a video, or, one rich card, or even stretch that to a carousel, then you pay with more tokens.
So you're like building on top of the base rate of 1 cent.
Exactly, yeah.
And then that can go up to whatever it is. And then on the other side, you'll have this session.
Yeah.
And that will be just an open kind of gateway.
Which will obviously also undercut the cost of 5 tokens.
Okay.
So that's the whole point of really kind of pushing people
to the session once it gets.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of the features and functionality for RCS, the brands. I know what the carriers think. I know what we think. What are the brands most interested in about RCS?
It's a fluffy answer, but pretty much everything.
Okay.
Because, one, you've got the metrics. So that really kind of carries it forward a long way compared to SMS.
Yeah. The open rate.
The open rate, how long someone looks at something, when they look at it, and then you can basically track what they then do, providing it obviously stays with RCS and there's not a deep link somewhere else. So you've got that functionality straight away, but then you've got the richness as well. So it's really kind of taking the richness that you'd find within an app, the functionality of messaging, and bringing it all into and keeping it in one channel.
Yeah.
So you're basically just there. In theory, you could get to the point in 5-10 years' time when you just spend all your time on RCS. What we're seeing in China with WeChat. That's ultimately where this should be going. Exactly.
Okay.
But I think 85% of people's time spent on WeChat.
Yes.
And there's absolutely no reason why RCS can't do something similar.
So payments, watch your car come to you. Everything within the messaging channel.
Well, there's some companies that already develop games to play inside RCS.
Yeah. Okay.
So these things are happening now. People are thinking beyond just this is a messaging platform.
What about like safety and security? Is that top of mind, or is that just an added benefit, or what are they looking at? Brands, or is it just banks that care about kind of the safety and security?
I think everyone does to a certain extent, but again, it depends on the kind of message. So there are brands that just like to send out SMS, and they're happy to use grey routes.
Okay.
For them, as long as they hit 80-90% of their database, they're quite happy because they know that ultimately people will read it and respond, and they've got some fantastic kind of conversions on the back of that. But I think in terms of something like RCS, it does need to be secure. I think people do view, and brands and banks in particular view SMS as a very secure channel. But I think there is concern around smishing and phishing that can happen, and that's also going to happen on RCS, because I know there's a lot of talk around protecting the consumer around sender verification.
Yes.
But the issue that you have with that is the consumer doesn't know what sender verification is. So they don't know what they're looking out for. So you could quite easily get a rogue company to put what could be, kind of a little sender verification tick in the body of the message.
To make it look
it's like authentic. It's
so until the consumer knows exactly.
So there needs to be a lot of education from consumers. So we kind of think that for example, when a consumer accepts, for example, the T's and C's from Google, for example, and they then become an RCS user, they are sent a message that said, this is RCS, this is what a message might look like from a brand, this is what you need to look out for. If you don't see this, then you have to treat this, the message with suspicion. So
it's going to be a lot of education.
It has to be, to make sure that it stays a clean channel. Because the issue that you have right now is that P2P RCS is free.
Yes.
So if you've got a database, you're obviously going to push it out to P2P users because it's free. And you're going to kind of capitalize on that and kind of abuse it.
Yes. Okay. Well, I got to get you going because you have to redo all this in front of everybody.
That's true.
For the whole RCS lab. When is the next report coming out, and how can they find it?
So our next RCS update will come out in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
That'll be on mobilesquared.co.uk.
Okay, and that will have the pricing. They'll have all the reporting.
No, you need to come to us for pricing.
Okay, so you're going directly to you. Okay. Do you do like a free report, and then is there an advanced?
We've done a Google Guest report that you can get for free, which shows the impact of Google rolling out Guest across Europe. Okay. And shows the kind of uplift in RCS user adoption. Okay. So that's there. We're doing so many reports at the moment.
So just check out, is it mobilesquared.co.uk.
That's right.
And you have a blog and a lot of interesting info. Also, you're on LinkedIn. I follow you. You have a lot of good info there, too.
We do.
Awesome. Hey, Thank you very much for stopping by. Thanks, everyone. Again, my name is Derek Johnson with Tatango.com, and this is Nick Lane from Mobile Squared.